Hey guys, Matt here. Now, I want to respect your time. I know you see the title of the video, so I want to give you the answer right away. And the answer is not yet, but we're getting there. For anyone who wants to stick around in this video, we're going to talk about, whether I'm going to be buying more Gevo anytime soon, given the we'll call it a crash, because it's been in the past 5 days, it's dropped about 9.5%. Yeah, it's sort of a mini crash. And then we're going to go over my weekly portfolio update, in which I'm going to talk about some moves I made and why I made them. So Gevo has had quite the rundown the past 5 days. Now, today, a good reason is because the market itself has been not doing so well. I think the whole inflation thing is really starting to affect things. But as far as Gevo itself, Gevo has been taking more of a beating than most of the other stocks that I've been watching. And if I look at the news, there wasn't a whole lot that's happened to Gevo this week, this is the week where Gevo has really been going down. This was actually a news from yesterday where Gevo assigned a whole other pact with a whole other company. Now, there was some news today in which it added some risk factors that we already knew. Now, I'm not going to read all this. I'm barely going to read it at all. You can pause and read this if you want to. It's basically stuff that we already knew. It's mainly that Gevo is going to, need stockholder approval if it wants to raise more capital, which we already knew from a few quarters ago. And then Gevo is going to expend significant resources in building its business, the RNG plant and the net zero plant. These are things we already knew, but the rest of the video itself was positive. Most analysts are rating Gevo a buy, and some of them are giving Gevo a strong buy. So yeah, Gevo has been sort of mini crashing this whole week, and it might continue throughout the week. Now, there is something I want to point out about this, because I do want to talk about what I'm doing about it. Let's take a quick look at my portfolio. You will note that if you've been watching my channel for some time, you will note that a couple portfolio updates ago, I was sitting at 20% gains with Gevo. Now, I'll level with you. I am very bullish on Gevo for the long term because there is a lot going for it as far as the contracts that are already in place. But having said that, the 20%, I was happy to see it, but as far as its current performance, I don't think Gevo has earned those 20% gains. Now, I was happy to see it, but like I said, I don't think Gevo has earned it. I think Lynn said in the latest earnings call, and I thought this was pretty funny. Lynn referred to Gevo as a pre-revenue company. Now, I thought that was really interesting, seeing as how Gevo has a history of having revenue. Now, I understand what he was trying to say, though. It's just the way Lynn worded it. Lynn's the CFO. That was just a very interesting take. But the point is that Gevo is not going to have revenue until the end of 2022 at best. And that's assuming it gets the RNG plant online as scheduled, if things go perfectly well. And I think investors know that. But despite that, what it does mean is that right now, Gevo is currently performing like shit. And so those 20% gains, like I said, I was happy to see it, but it probably didn't earn it. Now, whether it does earn it, that remains to be seen a year from now. Now, one thing I do want to point out, now I don't want to talk about the company that I sold, but because I don't want to give it more attention than I've already given it. But one thing I did learn is that as an investor, as a growing investor, I need to start being a lot more critical about, my bullish thesis and when I sell a stock. And my takeaway from that is that, so right now my bullish thesis on Gevo is that it's not going to do a single thing. There's going to be no real immediate catalyst except for business as usual until the RNG plant goes online and it can start fulfilling some of those contracts. So between now and then, the stock price really doesn't matter. And one thing I do want to point out, because this is not a to-the-moon channel, I don't want to just be the channel that only looks at the positive and never the negatives. I don't like to do that. As far as Gevo goes, what is the worst thing that can happen to it recently? As far as, affecting shareholders. And it's not nothing. Gevo doesn't have this in the bag. It practically does, but the worst thing that can happen is that Gevo doesn't build the plants on time. Well, or doesn't build the plants at all, or there's enough of a delay that some of these contracts, get nullified or they get broken or whatever. Like, the worst thing that can happen is Gevo doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. Now, so far, Gevo hasn't shown any sign of that being a possibility, but that is always something to keep in mind. And if, it starts coming down to 2022 and we start seeing some delays in the RNG plant or the net zero plant, like that, those are some red flags. And at that point, depending on the news, the particulars of the news, yeah, at that point, I might consider, rethinking my investment. But until then, I mean, I have no reason not to just keep on holding. However, if it does keep dropping, this might be a buying opportunity. I've said in previous Gevo videos that if it drops below my cost basis, like, I will start to load up, depending on how far it drops below that cost basis. Right now, we're sitting at 622. As of close of business today, we're sitting at 647. So we're only 3.9% above. Now, as a rule, I will not add shares. I know I've done this before, but I'm not going to do it again. I will not add more shares to Gevo unless it drops below my cost basis. That's the rule I'm going to try to follow. I'm going to try to stick to these rules more than I have been. So now, as far as the moves I made this week, you will note from the last portfolio update that I got a bunch of cash from the stock I sold, and I wanted to use it. I did buy some AT&T. But I bought a lot more Verizon. I spent about $1,000 on Verizon and about $500 on AT&T. And that's because I kind of want to focus more on Verizon as to get the shares up on that telecommunications stock. One of the reasons is that AT&T right now, it's already 10% of my portfolio value. And I kind of want to watch that a bit. Because, I mean, AT&T and Verizon, they're two different companies, but as far as their actions, the amount of debt they have, their goals and stuff, they're pretty much in the same boat. Like, they're both companies that are very strong in their field. They have a lot of debt. And they're both in a process of streamlining their businesses in order to, become just a 5G and internet and wireless company. So they're both doing the same thing. They're both trying to get to the same place. It's just that AT&T is a lot more dramatic about it, and it's a bit riskier. Because, I mean, Verizon, as far as I know, is not slashing its dividend in half next year. And so I kind of want to hedge my bet a lot, even more than I have been. So I want to get my Verizon shares up to at least the level of AT&T's, just in case next year happens and, things don't go as planned. And then, keeping with the lesson I learned earlier when I was talking about Gevo and, selling shares when business model changes. I mean, when AT&T's business model changed earlier this year, in looking back, I probably should have sold AT&T then. However, I mean, we're way past that now. I have a new thesis on AT&T. And my goal right now is to hold this stock at least until the split between Warner Media and AT&T happens. I want to see how AT&T runs itself after that. I want to see if it really does streamline and, it really does start to focus on its debt and becoming a safer dividend stock. So I will be holding on to my AT&T shares at least until the end of 2022, 2023. We will evaluate and see how AT&T does. And whether I'm up or down, if things are going how I want to with AT&T, I can always move my shares into Verizon. Hopefully for a profit, but we'll see what happens. And lastly, before I let you guys go, I did talk about in my last portfolio update what I want to do as far as buying Palantir. And I do love the company, and right now it is getting closer and closer to my go-in price. However, I mean, I really don't want to add another position to my portfolio because I already own 18 stocks. I'm trying to find a way to slim that down. However, I mean, I did buy ARK as an ETF a long time ago for this exact purpose. The whole point of me buying ARK, by the way, of which Palantir is a stock within ARK, the whole point of me buying ARK is so that I didn't have to add more positions. So, honestly, I could just pour my money into ARK, Because the whole point was sort of let Kathy Wood take the wheel with some of these, with some of these newer positions that I want to go in, but I don't want to waste the time in doing all the research and keeping track of it. That was the whole point of ARK. And why not just put my money into ARK? Now, I'm not going to do it right now because it's just, it is just barely below my cost basis. I do want to keep that in mind. However, if ARK keeps dropping, I will start putting my shares into ARK. I'd like to get this to about $4 grand or $5 grand as far as a, cost basis invested. But anyways, we'll see how that goes. But anyways, take care, have a great day, and eat your vegetables.